By Mr. Levenstein. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Boulay.
Present.
Mr. Bugarelli.
Present.
Mr. Duray. Ms. Green. Mr. Howard.
Here.
Mr. Lamar. Mr. Levenstein.
Here.
Ms. Politi.
Here.
Mr. Stridhart.
Here. Dr.
Thank you. Good evening. Beginning in this new academic year, I have asked representatives from our Student Council to provide an update to our Board of Education and community from the student perspective. We look forward to hearing from our student representatives each month. Tonight, we have our Student Council leadership, May, Lauren, and Rowan, and their advisor, Ms. Amanda O'Neill.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. Okay. Good evening. We are part of the Student Council that makes up Executive Council members. My name is May Islam, and I'm the Executive Council President and a senior at NFA Maine. This will be the first of many visits for the Student Council, and we'll be here to inform you about all the amazing activities, events, and more that will happen at the NFA campuses. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, no. Okay. All right. So let's begin. So firstly, students in the mock trial club have received this year's case. It is a criminal case involving arson of a failed business and the building that was in it. Students will be a learning witness, expert witness, and attorney roles. The second thing is the cosmetology senior and junior classes created a December project for holiday characters. All of these mannequins were sculpted with dry air clay and painted. Students worked in groups and presented their projects. They also did this with a pair of set of nails and poster. The Black History Club had two recent events. The students attended the Historically Black Colleges and Universities event at Danny Farrell State Park, and they ran an annual toy drive event in the benefit of Pediatric Department of St. Luke's Montefiore Hospital. The student-led club, SEL, Social Emotional Learning, hosted a Stress Less event at NFA Maine campus. Students had the opportunity to participate in a variety of activities to de-stress, including coloring, journaling, mindfulness activities, neck and shoulder massages, comfortable seating, and sensory play. The Key Club participated in a bell ringing for the Salvation Army at Walmart with Miss Kawanis, and is starting to plan their international night, which will take place on April 12th in the North Campus cafeterias from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The Colonnade Club is hosting the district/local Poetry Out Loud competition on January 11th. This event will be sponsored by the National Endowment of the Arts and Poetry Foundation. The local Poetry Out Loud competition is the first of several steps to possibly competing at state or even national levels. Students will recite several poems out, and judges will determine who will advance to the regional competition in February. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Cow, and I'm the Executive Council Vice President and a senior at Maine campus. Here are a few music depth highlights. Julian Lamar performed an all-state vocal jazz ensemble in Rochester. We had 12 students participating in an area all-state music festival in Walk Hill, including May. We have 14 students participating in the All-High School County Festival this month on January 19th and 20th. We had an incredible winter concert with a record number of alumni and friends performing with us on our Hallelujah chorus. Our next winter concert is January 17th, 2024 at 6 p.m. For NFA West News, students leaders Monique May and Tyson Hill were featured on CBS National News and CBS Radio to discuss the Yonder Pouch program and mental health. Seniors also hosted a student-led college and career expo event sharing colleges and financial aid information with underclassmen. This event included Mount St. Mary College and Vassar College students and staff members. The campus hosted a student-coordinated annual holiday talent show and annual advisory gingerbread house competition. For the NFA debate team, they competed in the prestigious Princeton Classic held at Princeton University. Members of the team competed against some of the best competition in the country while also being able to explore and visit the Ivy League school. On December 16th, a large contingent of NFA debaters had the great opportunity to compete at the Regis High School in New York City. This event had some of the best debate schools in the tri-state area. For sports, indoor track and field had a meet in New York City. For first place in the 1,000-meter run, setting a new record was Brady Danny Luke. In the first place for the 4x800-meter relay, Kendi Georges, Devin Badalik, David Pinnock, and Danny Luke. First place for the 4x200 relay, Pinnock, Anthony Burnett, June Rivas, and Akai Johnson. Wrestling also competed in the Mid-Hudson tournament at Arlington High School. The wrestling team finished 4th out of 27 teams with a score of 151.5. Ninth grader Will Soto won the 101-pound championship, and 11th grader Matthew Mercado won the 131 championship. STEAM classes presented and taught their final metal unit projects at GAMS to 2nd and 3rd graders. The project included metal acid reactivity, metal magnetic levitation, metal and simple currents, metal foil artwork, and more. Students from NFA P-Tech at North spent the day volunteering at the Hudson Highland Nature Museum in Cornwall. They were able to apply their learning from science classes as they saw firsthand what invasive species are doing to local ecosystems. Students volunteered, cleared over 30 contractor bags worth of Japanese knotweed and Japanese barberry from the forest and met with members of the board of directors. Several young scholars have planned to return and volunteer there on their upcoming weekends. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rowan Hoyt, and I'm the Executive Council Secretary and a senior at the North Campus. So, a group of seniors went to GAMS to read stories to the pre-K students right before winter break and plan to attend again this spring. NFA's advanced dance team performed sections from the recent NFA Dance Department winter concert, Merry Mayhem, for the pre-K students at GAMS, and the event finished up with a dance party. NFA's marching band performed for Pearl Harbor Day and an event sponsored to show support for families who lost loved ones and pay our respects to those that fought during the attacks. The Madrigals also performed at this event as well. The NFA Maine Music Department had their annual Carol Fest to help raise money for music events and scholarships. Mr. Jakob and his auto body classes have been working to refurbish the used box truck. They are converting the truck into a work truck for a local handyman who owns his own business. The Student Council ran their annual Luis and Loretta Stockings with Miss Larkin and Miss O'Neill. They were able to deliver over 50 stockings of needed items to the residents at the Sapphire Nursing Home at Meadow Hill. National Honor Society students have assisted at a variety of events hosted by elementary schools within our district. They have helped at Fostertown, Vales Gate, GAMS, and Bombville, who have hosted events like math game nights, Jinkle Jams, trunk or treats, holiday shops, STEAM nights, back-to-school nights, and holiday bazaars. Our NHS members have helped set up and take down the events, run arts and crafts tables, and any other needed tasks. They also have a variety of NH students who peer tutor within their building, helping underclassmen achieve success in difficult classes. In the Empire program, NHS members volunteer to help special needs students who signed up for the Basic Skills cooking class. Cyber Patriot is the national youth cyber education program created by the Air and Space Forces Association to inspire students towards careers in cybersecurity. The program is the National Youth Cyber Defense Competition, the nation's largest cyber defense competition that put high schools and middle school students in charge of securing virtual networks. At NFA Maine, 2 civilian teams competed this year alongside the NFA ROTC teams. The civilian teams are coached by Elizabeth Thomas Capello. Both teams advanced to the state finals, with our more experienced team placing number 4 in New York State. Thank you, and here's a brief video to accompany the information we just shared with you.
Now close. Thank you so much for your presentation and for sharing the student experience of our high schools and some of our elementary buildings. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you. Thanks, Ms. O'Neill.
Move on to item number 3, committee as a whole, standing board committees. Oh, Mr. Howard, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say thank you to those young ladies and thank you to our students because they really, some of the things they talked about, some of the things they said, our kids are rocking. Our students are rocking. And I see them throughout the communities. I see them at Motorcyclepedia. I see them over at the Armory. I see them in nursing homes. I see them all over the community that we represent. And they do such great things. And we have to find a better way of promoting what our kids do. When something negative happens in one of our schools, it's all over the media. Everybody hears about it. But nobody's hearing about these events, these programs, these initiatives that our students are doing at the high school level, at the middle school level, and at the elementary level. And I just want to commend you, students, for rocking. And I got to tell you, I have a sense of pride because I'm a goldback. I went to Newburgh Free Academy. I went to junior high school here. I went to elementary school here. When I hear the great things that you guys are doing and representing, as we say, I am so proud of you. And I think 2 things I wanted to mention. So when they had that incident across from North Junior High School, I hope Mr. Dotto is here to talk about that, about those students that went across and did what they learned in the nursing courses and went over there and administered first aid. Like, that's what they do. That's what we do. That's that gold-back pride. And that needs to be talked about, Mr. Dotto. And another thing that came across my desk, I just found out that we have the #1 track team or 4x100 team in the nation, Newburgh Free Academy. Newburgh in the nation. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Committee as a whole, standing board committees. 3.1, process for committee structure. It's on for discussion and information. Is there a presentation?
There's not a presentation. What we would like to do is to just review the document that we shared with you on Friday evening and to hear any of the comments or feedback from the board. Obviously, this is a collaborative effort between the board and the central office. I tried to give you some of what a committee as a whole is traditionally across the country. So the committee as a whole is really the precursor to the business meeting as it's been developed. Because we have standing items as well as committee of the whole, it's kind of a hybrid that we're creating. So it's really necessary for us to share with you our perspective on what it would look like, to receive your feedback to make sure we're all on the same page. So that's why it says draft. We're here for your comments based on what we presented. Thank you.
Board members have any questions? Mr. Levenstein?
So I have some comments, and being involved with committees for a long time. So there's a few things that I dislike about the way this is set up, so I will point them out and hopefully maybe take some into consideration. So firstly is the time allotted for these meetings, which is an hour, and it has a hard stop in it because we have a board meeting at 6, the committee meetings start at 5, and a lot of times an hour isn't enough to do all what needs to be done. Another thing is I am concerned about the meetings, again, being right before a board meeting. So there was a policy meeting tonight right before this. As a general rule, prior to this, I would always view the tape the next day and follow the meeting to understand and any concerns that I have or know what was brought forward. But now I can't because it's over at 6 and we start at 6. So I'm concerned about the time, the hard stop, and when it's placed in the week. And part of it is, and I've said this over the years, resolutions should be vetted and brought forward. okay? And we have resolutions brought forward twice a month. Meeting once a quarter, I understand the meeting once a quarter for these quarterly projects, but for the everyday minutia of running a school district, I don't think that meeting once a quarter should be done. And again, if you recall, if I reported out on a committee, I would say which resolutions that committee vetted and which they didn't. I want the rest of the board members to understand, what may not have been vetted. So that's another point for having it more often for the minutia of all that needs to be done by the board. Thank you. Also,
Okay.
if in the same thing as the committee as a whole structure, I'm trying to figure out that too, again, because there's resolutions that fall under curriculum and capital bond projects and facilities, and I'm just trying to understand how they may be brought forward and discussed and vetted prior to a meeting. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Lamar?
Will all the resolutions that are coming before us, will they have gone through a committee of the appropriate committee that they normally would have? So I guess what I'm asking is, if you've got a committee that's meeting quarterly, will all the actions that would normally fall under that committee's purview be held back? I don't know how we can do that. It just seems like the frequency is an important thing, if this is the way we're going to go.
But I guess what I hear you saying is it's your request that all resolutions be vetted through a committee? Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, the majority of them tend to have been done that way, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is there a reason that would change with this structure?
So we wanted to do things a little bit differently because we understand the commitment and the time, and we're starting rather late in terms of our committee assignments, but we would calendar to ensure that all of the asks or business items do come to committee and pertinent committees to ensure that we have board action. So we did think about what are the types of things that come to committee, what do we need, because essentially, if you really think about it, we are in January, and we have not had committees, but the business of the district has been moving outside of the committees. So there are things that will come to the committee, and there are things that will come to the entire board through a board meeting.
I have a follow-up question, just the same type of question. You have on the Personnel Committee will meet on an as-needed basis, monitors and addresses labor relations and collective bargaining. You don't have on there the traditional personnel agenda item, which is to review all hires. Is that going to be added to the personnel, or is that not going to happen?
So those types of items we will bring to the full board as needed. We are revising the structure of the Personnel Committee, because some of those items are recommendations.
As an example, if we hiring a high-level administrator, the Personnel Committee, according to this format, would not be reviewed by a committee prior to getting to the full board. It wouldn't be able to address concerns of the board.
So a hire goes through a hiring committee. We have a process that we utilize to hire. We don't necessarily need it to go through a personnel committee to make a recommendation for a hire. A hire comes through a committee and a process that we utilize. That's not something that must come through a board committee.
It's my recommendation, because it's worked over the years, to avoid certain problems before it gets to a full board meeting. So it's my recommendation that it be added. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but high-level hires by the district should come before at least a 3-person committee prior to being put out to the public. And Mr. Levinstein.
I can respond. Any recommendations that are made generally comes out of the superintendent's recommendation, so it's not, the board committee doesn't vet candidates. That's part of the role of the administrative body. And so coming to the personnel committee is not necessarily an action that must be taken to hire someone. It may be a matter of what we have practiced, but it's not necessarily a requirement of a personnel committee body.
Oh, okay, so as long as we're on personnel to go forward with this, I was always under the impression that the committee, that was a vetting spot for creating positions or eliminating positions or going in a certain direction, not so much Mrs. Jones is applying for this job. So yes, it may be brought to their attention that this is what's going to be put on the agenda, and if that committee, just like any other committee, I'm just using this because we're speaking about it, the same applies to audit and policy. If that committee has any questions they would like to vet, they can bring it forward. The rest of the board may ask those same questions if they don't view the tape of that meeting. And I'm just saying that kind of in between the two of you here, that it's yes, positions, and no, that the personnel committee is not making the hiring decisions. They may have some vetting questions that are public. They may have vetting questions that are not public that can be recommended to the board later. Thank you.
Ms. Boulay.
So I, as a board member, vote based on the information that I receive and the research that I do. It is extremely important, in my opinion, that the Board of Education has the right to ask any questions they want as needed. This list that's here talks about, and I have heard before, said aloud, for example, under exceptional learners, which the committee does not exist anymore, that report's given once a year. On this paper, it says once a year, but if a board member has any concerns for that department or for that whole structure, my question is, this new format that you're suggesting would not preempt that. That if we have questions about anything, that we could ask them. And part two, at one point there was a discussion or a idea of having community input, which is something that I value 100%. This presentation, this as it's presented to us, does not allow for community input, and there's a time frame attached to pertinent, really critical items like curriculum. So those are my two concerns with it.
Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one comment on some of the feedback I've heard so far. You still have the opportunity to ask questions and to have dialogue as each resolution is presented for your consideration. That is absolutely your right to ask those questions and engage in that dialogue throughout this process. We're not taking that away or even considering having that been taken away. With regards to exceptional learners, the Exceptional Learners Committee was eliminated last year. The Exceptional Learners Committee did not operate last year. It was not a board committee. What we agreed to do in collaboration with our Newburgh Teachers Association was to create a task force to engage in dialogue between some of our practitioners in the classroom and our administrators at the central office to talk about special education. What we've heard from our superintendent is that the special education students aren't the only needed students that are in need in our district, and we have to address the needs of all of our students. So when you look at the English language learners and you look at our economically disadvantaged students, those are also learners that we need to stay focused on and come up with interventions to address their needs in the classroom. So what Dr. Campbell has asked that Mr. Bear and I do is expand that special education task force that was originally planned to address the needs of the subgroups and the subpopulations that are areas of need in our district.
Any other questions? Just as a comment, the structure that was put forth in September for the Committee of the Whole and the traditional committees is different than the presentation tonight. My concern is we don't have an approved structure by the board. What is in place now? What I'd like to ask Mr. Shaw, in the absence of an approved structure, what structure are we operating on? The previous structure that was approved by the board until a new one is approved?
If the previous structure was not rescinded, it would be in place until replaced.
So that's the monthly meetings. Until a new structure is approved, we are operating on the pre-approved structure of monthly meetings without the committee of a whole. Is that what you're saying?
In part. I also said if you would rescind the current structure, it would no longer exist.
So in the absence of a rescission, we are operating under the previous structure.
That's what I said.
Okay. So we're kind of left in limbo at this point. Without a rescission, this is the discussion item, we are going to operate under the previous until possibly the next board meeting. What is the schedule for the traditional meetings? Do we have dates? I've never seen dates of meetings.
I'll defer to the clerk, but we normally get those dates from the board with regards to when the committees would meet. I can mention to you one thing with regards to policy. With policy, because we're doing a full-scale review of those policies, there is not a need to meet on policy every month because those policies are being reviewed in a cycle along with New York State School Boards Association. And in the event there's an emergency review of a policy that's warranted and needed, we would ask for an emergency policy meeting. So that's just one example of, because of the process we're using with policy, it's not really necessary to meet every month because a lot of work has to happen before we get to a policy committee as we do this full review.
Mr. Howell, I'm going to get to you. So at the last meeting, the committee's assignments were approved, but not the calendar. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Howard.
Mr. President, so Mr. Forget, so you just made a statement in regards to if an emergency comes up, a meeting can be requested. So that any board member can request a meeting if there's something in regards to a policy or personnel or one of these committees as a whole. They would make that recommendation through the board president, and then we would get a consensus of the board to see if that meeting is wanted by the entire board. Is that how that works?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Shaw, do we have emergency committee requests, or how does that work?
There's certainly a right to have an emergency board meeting. That could be called in accordance with policy. Bringing it down to the committee level for an emergency call, I'm not sure that the policies currently allow for that, but the committee, the whole board, you can have those special meetings called on at least 24-hour notice.
Mr. Howard?
So what Mr. Ford just said is, who does that pertain to?
Mr. Forget.
Mr. Shaw, if there is a situation where a student is being prevented from entering into a program, whether it's athletics or some other situation, that one of our policies prevents us from moving forward, can't we have the board chair request a special meeting of the policy committee to hold that meeting to address the needs of that student? Because that's what I was referring to. Perhaps emergency is the wrong terminology, but when need arises, doesn't the chair have the right to do that?
Usually the committees make recommendations for board action. They don't have the authority to make the decisions for the district. Those are either executive action of the super or board action. And I'm unaware of any delegation other than that.
Mr. Howard.
So that is the reason why I said if a board member would want to request a meeting, the entire board would make a decision and get a consensus. That's what I said. So is that wrong? Are you still saying that's wrong?
It wouldn't be a committee. It would be the whole board. It would be a board meeting.
Right, it would be a board meeting, and if 5 or more board members show up, you'll have a meeting on at least 24 hours' notice.
Mr. Forget.
Right. So what I hear Mr. Shaw saying is you're going to need the full board anyway to approve the policy. So don't meet in committee, just meet with the full board on a special meeting.
That's what I was trying to say, yes.
If any board members have any more suggestions or comments about this structure, just email me. I'll forward it to the superintendent, and for the next meeting, we can figure something out.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move to item 4, public comment on agenda items. Just please, everyone has 5 minutes. Please, no names. Keep it civil. And nobody signed up for public comment on agenda items. Would anybody like to speak on agenda items? Okay, we'll move to non-agenda items. Mr. Josiah Placide, hope I said that well. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education. My name is Josiah Placid. I am a sophomore in the P-TECH program, and I'm here to talk to you today about the yonder pouches at NFA North Campus. It's been over a month since we started using the yonder pouches at the North Campus, so I'd like to inform you of 3 things. What's working, what's not working, and some actionable solutions we could use to help improve the use of yonder pouches. I actually like the yonder pouches. It's a good thing the school has thought of, and it's really improved most of our students. So I'll start off with what's working. So far, personally, I've seen more student-teacher interactions. Students have been going to teachers for help with the work they were given, and teachers have been going to students for if they need extra assistance with anything. There's been more student-to-student interactions. This occurs sometimes when students are talking to each other more and having more creative ideas with each other. This happens especially during group work and projects, and there's been more student participation overall. There's been more assignments getting done during class periods and have been getting done during class and handed in on time. Students project more confidence now by projecting their voice, and rather than looking up, rather than looking down on their phones or any other electronic device. Students are now more active and enthusiastic during gym classes or any other active classes, like basketball, volleyball, etc. And during class time, students are absorbing the material more that the teacher is teaching them and remember what is taught in class. And these students are more focused and extra happy to be in class like I am. So next, I'll move on with what's not working with the yonder pouches. So recently, I've seen long lines that result in some students missing some or even half of first period, especially those who come later than 6:50 a.m. In these long lines, there has been an extra 10 to 15 minutes just to get to the metal detectors to be checked. Also, I've seen an increased use of iPads, gaming computers, and personal laptops being used during class. Since these cannot fit into yonder pouches, but they have the same attributes as a phone, like texting, gaming, and other social media, my question to the Board of Education is how do you plan to counteract this idea that students have thought of? Next, I'll move on to dismissal. There has been a huge influx of students rushing to exits to get their pouches open first, I've been hearing that this can possibly result in some acts of violence. And also, during this dismissal time, students skip ninth period to get in front of the crowd, this large crowd, and get their pouches open first. So next, I'll move on to the actionable solutions that will help with the issues that have been seen over the past month. These issues could possibly be implemented next school day, of course, with the BOE's approval. Let me begin with the morning process. I was thinking that the schools should utilize all entrances, during the morning process. And on the entrances, there should be at least 2 signs with 2 signs. One of those lines for those who have the yonder pouches, and the other for those who don't have the yonder pouches. And for the signs, I was thinking maybe to be simplified, one could possibly be green for those who have the yonder pouches, and the other one could possibly be red for those who forgot the yonder pouches. This could act as a deterrent for those who forgot the yonder pouches, because this line will be much delayed. And the school will have to monitor those and document and tag the phones that were missing. Next, I'll move on to the dismissal process. The school should increase the number of magnets around the school exits that are monitored by staff or security members for better crowd control during this time. This is a preventative measure to discourage aggressive confrontation and limit the number of students skipping ninth period. And to help with the problem about extra electronic devices, the school maybe should implement a total ban on all additional electronic devices. Students who still bring them to school after the ban will have to drop them off at the principal's office and pick them up later, and could face more disciplinary action. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. Could you possibly give us that speech, email it to us, or something? If you have it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Next on the list is Dolores Hamer.
I love you. Speak your piece, though. Speak your piece.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Dolores Hamer. I came here today to try to find a resolution to busing for all of us who's homeless. I'm currently placed at the Ramada Motel up on Route 317K. We having a real serious issues with the cars stopping for the school buses even stopping for the kids. We have to call the town of Newburgh police. We have to call them a half an hour before every time each bus comes for the kids, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary, or for whatever. They have to be called a half an hour before. The DARE police from the town of Newburgh, I don't know if they reached out to y'all. They said they was. He said he felt it's very dangerous for the kids to be meeting at the end of the road. The bus drivers is saying that the school district told them that it's private property, so they're not allowed to turn up into the property, which I don't understand. If it's private property, how is certain school buses allowed to turn up in there? You still have West Point tours turn up in there. You have Gallagher turn up in there. You have Marlboro School District that turn up in there and literally pick kids up from the door. In front of the building, I feel it's okay. They should be able to pull up there. It's ample enough space for the buses to turn around, come out, even it's a light so they're not held up in traffic. But somebody need to come up there and view the property and view and see what's going on, because the way it is now, it doesn't work, and we've been fighting this for the last couple months now and haven't gotten any response back from anybody about this situation or this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have the contact information. But Jessica Finkel, please.
Good evening. I'm Jessica Finkel. I have pretty much the same situation as Dolores had, except my son is disabled fully. He could barely walk, talk, communicate, all of that. I had to fight since September until just 2 weeks ago to get the bus just to pull in off of Route 300 with my son. It is on his IEP. Don't think I haven't called. I've called the school. I've called the bus garage. I've called the homeless liaison. I've made several phone calls, emails. And, you know, I think it's a little outrageous to have that when other buses, I do see kids without disabilities being picked up right from the main door or from their door closest to their hotel room. I feel the treatment's a little off. I know New York State rules for disabilities is that they are supposed to be picked up in a very safe location. And when we were in a different school district, he had to legally be picked up in front of our home because he's not allowed to walk due to his medical condition. Because if he were to fall and hit his head, he could possibly die. So it's a serious situation. The fact that it did take months to get to where we are right now, and then now if there's a substitute bus driver, they don't even stop for my son. They just keep going. And so he's missed a lot of school because of this. There's just countless issues with the bus garage. And they had said because it's private property. I have videos, I have pictures, I have proof that it's not private property. I've talked to the owners of the hotel. They have said that it's not private property. Any bus is welcome to come up. And, you know, so I don't see what the issue is, but I would like this to be fixed as soon as possible, especially with the cold weather, the ice. You know, it's a hotel. They don't do great, honestly, around there. We don't live in the best living conditions, so it's difficult to get my son to the bus to get to school, and he does want to go to school, and I want him to go. So if we could try to work this out, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak on non-agenda items? Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose: employment history of certain pedagogical employees or corporations and the matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, collective bargaining under the Taylor Law, CSEA, NTA, and SAA, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levenstein? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
We will return in approximately 1 hour. All right, we're back. Superintendent, Dr. Manning Campbell.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. With the start of a new calendar year, I want to share some hopes that I have for 2024 as we focus on the second half of our school year and begin preparations for next year. My hopes for 2024 are to strengthen the climate and culture in our school buildings and throughout our district as a whole. Climate and culture lends itself to collegiality, collaboration, and pride, which is often the foundation of any success story. Our children and our community deserve that foundation and atmosphere to learn and work. A cornerstone element of a strong climate and culture is positive relationships. As we strengthen our relationships with one another, we enhance our commitment to the education of our children and the betterment of our community. Our children deserve to witness strong relationships among their role models and to benefit from what those relationships can achieve together. Finally, I would like to strengthen collaboration among adults and narrow our focus to meet student needs. This is not limited to any one person or group of people, but includes every adult we have in the Newburgh Enlarged City School District. We each have a critical role in educating our children. It is only when we leave our silos and commit to working together that we can achieve success for every Goldback every day. I look forward to working together to see my hopes come to fruition in the coming months. More specifically, I would like to outline my priorities for the back half of this school year. Capacity building. We will work to strengthen the capacity of all leaders in the district to support all teachers in the district who will impact learning outcomes for all Goldbacks. Attendance. We want to see every Goldback every day. Middle level redesign. We are currently working with central office, school leaders, teachers, and staff collaborating to design a middle-level program that is more responsive to our students and focuses on personalized learning. And resurrecting the School Transformation Office, making a concerted effort toward monitoring and providing differentiated supports to all schools in our district based on their identification in the NYSED accountability system, New York State Education. I look forward to these next few months as we work to improve learning for our students in a variety of ways. Thank you. Item 7.2, resolution to approve revised board members committee assignments 2023 to 2024.
Can I have a motion and a second? Any questions on this item? Mr. DeRay.
Excuse me. So thank you a lot for allowing me to comment. Before the board votes on this resolution regarding committee assignments, I'd like to recap why we are still assigning members to committees after the last board meeting where assignments were voted on and approved by the board. Prior to being seated on the board, each of the 9 board members stood and took an oath of office. Maybe I'm somewhat of a relic, but I believe if you take an oath of office, you should live up to the oath. It's important. The oath is, I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of trustee of the Board of Education according to the best of my ability. My focus is on the best of my ability. For many years, members of committees were chosen by the president of the board. Under state education law, that method is perfectly acceptable. At the last board meeting, the board voted to change the method to having the board select and appoint committee members. This method under state education law is equally acceptable. I'll reference the New York State School Boards Association Board Committees Guide. It states membership on designated committees is determined by the board or the board president if designated by board policy. But back to this evening. The reason we are again appointing committee members is to backfill vacancies created since the last meeting by 3 members of the board who have decided that they will refuse to serve on any committee the board appointed them to serve on. For clarity, board policy states that any board member may refuse a committee appointment without prejudice. Understood. However, I don't believe the off-ramp was designed so that a board member could refuse all committee assignments. Regarding the current situation, there are members who were appointed by the board president to committees who have now refused to serve on the exact same committees after being appointed by the board. Going back to the oath they took, my questions are, how does refusing to serve align with serving to the best of your ability? How does refusing to serve help our students, which is the very reason we serve? How does refusing to serve help the constituents you claim to represent? Have you asked them? How does refusing to serve help the community at large? How does refusing to serve help the administration? The very fact that each of these members may have views that are polar opposites of other members on the committee is exactly the reason to serve. Diverse opinions and different views of the same subject are the reasons to engage on a committee. We are supposed to be role models for our students. Does cherry-picking which part of the job you like align with being a positive role model? What would our view be of a student who refused assignments they weren't pleased with? How about our star running back telling the coach he won't play on 3rd down and long because chances are he'll fail at making a 1st down? No teacher, no coach would tolerate student behavior that demonstrates an unwillingness to do the entire job. In the case of the 3 board members, the taxpayers should not tolerate a blatant unwillingness to do the entire job. This is strictly my opinion, but I recommend that any member who refuses to do the whole job honestly ask themselves, am I serving to the best of my ability? I suggest you are not. I would encourage you to resign your seat and provide a better qualified community member with the chance to have the honor of being seated at this table and performing the job of board trustee in its entirety. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak?
I would.
Ms. Boulay.
So to be perfectly clear to anyone who's listening, it has always been the job per two policies that run our district that it is the president of the Board of Education who decides who serves on what committees. I totally respect that. This group of 5 who are saying now 3 of us don't want to serve flat out killed those committees. Even though there was a second opportunity, a meeting in the middle, to satisfy people who didn't like what they got. Not only did they refuse to serve under the same option that I wrote to the board president to not serve, so this is not new, it's not people not wanting to serve, it's following what the policy says. So those 5 abolished all committees. So for the last 7 months, we have given up our checks and our balances, our right and our power as the Board of Education to oversee and monitor. When this action was taken at the last meeting, they only changed one policy. There's another one that's still out there that gives the president that full authority. I am not going to serve on a committee when we can't even get it together to get the 2 policies changed. Secondly, because that policy still exists giving the president power, I'm all about the straight and the narrow. Until that thing goes, I'm not going to serve on committees that were designed by people who didn't want to play in the sandbox, plain and simple. My vote here, my research here, the information I get here dictates how I vote. This is the power. I was elected on rebuild and reform, and that's what I will do. That's my opinion. But I take offense to you saying I am less than qualified or competent because I won't play the way you want me to. Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Levinstein.
So nobody abolished any committees here. We didn't approve committee members originally. And then the board as a whole, the majority of the board as a whole, picked members for committees. So, with that said, in reference to 7.2 today, these changes in committee assignments are being made because some board members do not want to participate in the obligations that come with being a school board member. So the committee assignments have been given to willing and able board members. Some notes that should be said so the public is aware and have a deeper understanding is that, number 1, the president is a member of all committees, and number 2, 2 of the board members refused to serve in the exact same committee positions that the president assigned them to. So that is why there's the recommendation on this resolution is to add members to replace the ones that aren't participating. And when all comments are done, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to amend this resolution when everybody's comments are all finished.
Would anybody else like to comment? Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. So one thing I'm a big fan of is we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to the facts. Facts are the facts. Mr. DeRay clearly stated that both versions of how board committees are selected are approved or okay through the state, New York State School Boards Association. And I think what we need to understand, it's not about not playing in the box. It's about what a majority of 9 is. A majority of 9 is 5. If you happen to be on the minority side of that number, it doesn't allow you to, or anyone not to want to play in the sandbox. at times, and was told to me a couple years ago by a friend of mine who happened to be sitting over here as the board clerk, this year's majority can be next year's minority. And that's what happens in school boards. But a school board is dictated by a consensus of 9, simple as that. So, we make those decisions and we had to live with them. So, like I said, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but you don't have the rights to your own set of facts. Thank you.
I do have a comment before Ms. Boulay. I received 3 emails in the order: Ms. Boulay, Mr. Lamar, and Ms. Green, removing themselves according to, I forget the name and number of the policy. I forwarded them to the clerk so that the rest of the board could have it. And I'm going to paraphrase their reason for not wanting to be on the committees. They can speak for themselves, which they have. They don't want to be part of a circus. They think that this has become a circus. And the compromise that was put forward to the board at this point, maybe 2 months ago, was that 3 out of the 4 committees would be chaired by those that are in the majority, and that 1 committee would be chaired by those that are in the minority. And that was rejected. And there were committees that certain members refused to be part of, and in fact, the committees were disbanded by the majority. So that is a fact. We had nothing. We had no information, and the current committee structure and the assignments were completely in the majority's control, and they don't want to play in that circus. It is a circus atmosphere, and they're just not willing to participate. It's an adult decision. It's not an easy decision. They want to be part of this board, but the 5 have made it very clear they do not want any part of it. So they removed themselves from those committees so that they could see it from a different view and vote on, as a board of 9, any issues that the committees are reviewing. So, Ms. Boulay.
Just want to clarify again, fact, there were 2 policies that you had to change in order for you to be allowed to do what you're doing now. You only changed one of them. The other one clearly still gives the president the authority. I was absent because I had the flu for 16 days, but I made sure that I forwarded to Mr. McCoy that statement that I'm assuming was read at the last meeting, that there's another policy that you need to change in order to have the authority to do this.
Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Howard.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unfair to refer to a board of education elected by the community, the constituents, and serving the student population of this district as a circus. I take offense to that, and I would just like to say, I've been on this board now for 12 years, and I've been on the majority side, I've been on the minority side. I've never heard it referred to as a circus. I've heard, it's very important that your voice is heard if you're not in the majority, but to refer to it as a circus, not wanting to play in the sandbox, I think we need to get a little clarity, understanding what a majority or consensus of 9 is. And in referring to the board as a circus, I would say that timeline goes back to probably July. What happened in July? Thank you.
Any other members? Mr. Levenstein.
I would like to make a motion to amend Resolution 7.2 to the following. Mr. Bergarelli to replace Mr. Howard on Audit and Finance.
Second, I'm sorry.
Any questions on this amendment? Roll call to amend.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiard?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
No.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
No.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
That amendment passes.
Now we have to vote on the entire resolution 7.2. Can I have we already have a motion. Can a roll call, please?
Stridiron?
No.
Ms. Boulay?
No.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
No.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
That item passes.
Item 7.3. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you. Item 7.3, resolution to opt out of the New York State 485B property tax exemption.
Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on this item? Mr. Levinstein.
Could Mr. Shaw give us like a brief outline of what this resolution means?
Yes. There is an automatic partial property tax exemption under the law if there is an improvement to a building and it involves employing a certain number of additional employees. That's automatic by law. This resolution would undo that so that there wouldn't be that partial tax exemption by operation of law. And it was introduced into the legislature because the sponsor wanted, in addition to this kind of partial exemption, requiring the use of organized labor in projects that would be subject to the partial tax exemption.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Roll call.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, item 7.4, Ms. Onyx Peterson, the district's Assistant Superintendent, Chief Information Officer, and Data Privacy Officer will provide a presentation on attendance throughout our district with Dr. Cloyd.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight I'm going to review the district's data regarding attendance, chronic absenteeism, and the district goals around addressing attendance concerns. Dr. Cloyd is going to be joining me. She's the Director of Registration and Special Projects. And within her role in the district, she oversees enrollment, disenrollment, and just general registration for our students. She collaborates with our homeless liaison as well as our attendance officers throughout the district. So I just want to recap that attendance is a collaborative process. It's a process where daily teachers take attendance and they let us know if our students are in our seats. Our clerks certify that attendance, and administration oversees whether or not that process is being done. Our students and parents verify whether the attendance that they are receiving on their report cards and within their parent portal are being reflected accurately. The first piece of data that I'm going to go over is the average daily attendance rate for the school district. If we look at average daily attendance, allows us to see as a school where are our students in terms of attending daily. It takes the number of students and it shows us a little bit about how our schools are functioning. If we look at the 22-23 school year, what we will see is that our average daily attendance, we are still not back to our pre-COVID. We did gain a little momentum from the prior year, but we are still struggling post-pandemic. If we look at the average monthly attendance across the district, December is a tough month. And for many of you, even this December, this is where a lot of illnesses set in. We definitely are going to probably see that this time next year as well, as we still are dealing with COVID and flus and seasonal things. So December as a district is usually our lowest attendance month. But this helps us also build interventions throughout the school year to try to address some of the things that we may be seeing. If we look at chronic absenteeism for the 22-23 school year, as a reminder, chronic absenteeism is measured. It's a federal measure and a state measure that's put in place for students that are in grades 1st through 12th grade. It actually is a measure of how many students that we have that have been enrolled for 10 days that are absent more than 10%. So if we look at our chronic absenteeism data, we made gains from the previous year in decreasing that average, but we are still struggling with some of our special populations. Our homeless population, our multiracial, and our economically disadvantaged are some of our highest chronic absenteeism numbers, and we really need to focus on how we are putting in supports throughout our school community to support those students. But I really wanted to look at how are we doing compared to the nation, because we have local data and then there's national data. And if we look at our national data, this is taken from Attendance Works. They study 10 states throughout the nation, and they look at chronic absenteeism numbers. We still are above some of these national averages for these 10 states. But if you look at the gains that they have overall, Newburgh has made a 5% decrease in our chronic absenteeism, where on average throughout these states it's about 2%. The reason why there's not complete national data is that some states are not reporting chronic absenteeism, New York being one of them. We can see things in the headlines from New York City. However, the chronic absenteeism rate has not been published for many years. I think because as education in general, we are really struggling in getting students to attend on a consistent basis throughout the nation. So this is not just a Newburgh issue, it's a nationwide issue. If we look at chronic absenteeism, this is the trend data for our district. The yellow bar indicates our grade levels 1 through 8, and the blue bar indicates our grade levels 9 through 12. There's a significant difference that we're seeing with our secondary students. We definitely have to do different things to address those students and engage them to attend daily. This is our chronic absenteeism comparison across our buildings year over year. I just want to highlight that, again, for the second year in a row, South Middle School has the lowest chronic absenteeism rate. So Christina will talk to you more about how we were looking at our data over the summer, but this is one of the things that we definitely wanted to look at and to study. Why is it that this one institution within our organization is doing so much better than the other institutions, and how can we replicate this work throughout our district? This is the attendance comparison from our average daily attendance versus our chronic absenteeism rates for each school. And these are our ethnicity comparisons. How are our students of different ethnicities feeling welcomed and affirmed within our school environment, and how are they attending daily? So this is also an important thing for building level leaders to look at. If there's certain spaces within their organization, within their building or within their student population where students are not attending, why is that? Why are they not attending, and what can we do to get those students to attend? We also look at special population, which are our English language learners, our exceptional learners, and our poverty students. And there hasn't been only a 1% increase across those populations. Sometimes we have students that fall within all of these categories all at the same time. So I can have a student that is chronically absent, that happens to be an exceptional learner, and is economically disadvantaged. So it was interesting when looking at the data that they all came out about 86%, and it's about a 1 to 2% increase. So what are we doing in the buildings to address the special populations?
Okay. So, good evening. So as Ms. Peterson shared with you, we began this work over the summer. We knew that attendance had to be addressed, and we also knew that it was one of the major goals of the district is to really get our kids into our schools, have those welcoming and affirming environments for them to come in and to be comfortable and to enjoy the day as they learn all that they need to know. So as we got together, myself, our director of PPS at the time, and our director of instructional technology. We went to these various websites and looked at various attendance trends on Attendance Works. We looked at different resources and different things like that. And one of the things that we pulled out was also our Newburgh and Large City School District systems and interventions. And we did an analysis of that. From that point, we wanted to really get down into the buildings and have conversations with the building administration in order to build our district plan, but also in order to support the buildings in getting our kids into schools. So what we did was we developed a rubric, and those areas of focus, building intervention plans, chronic absenteeism, daily attendance rates, certification of attendance, and also our enrollments and disenrollments are very impactful in the areas of our reporting of our chronic absenteeism. So what we put into place is we put in a cadence of meetings with our buildings. The meetings will occur and have already started on a quarterly basis. And what those meetings do is we talk about all of the aspects around attendance in each building. We meet with the building administrator and we talk about all the data that they have, current data, past data, and how is it informing their building plans and moving forward from there. What are they looking at? What have they done well in the past? What are they looking to replicate and build bigger? What are they looking to improve on? And what are they looking to add that they've gotten from somewhere else and they want to try it out? We want to make sure that our kids are being welcomed in the building, they're comfortable in the building, they're safe. We also want to make sure that those welcoming and affirming environments extend to our parents. Our parents are our first connection to having our children, our youngest children, into the buildings. We looked at interventions. What are some of those interventions? We talked about those. What are some of the things that are working, replicating them, and also down to the nuts and bolts. What are the processes and procedures that are happening? What can we build on? Again, let's review, reflect, revise, and improve upon as needed. So from our meetings, our first round of meetings, I'm just going to focus on some of the schools here. For example, on this page, you see that Horizons on the Hudson. Some of the data that they shared with us was that they repeatedly go over their attendance data with their staff during faculty meetings, during grade level meetings, during PLCs, and they celebrate student attendance. So that was one of their glows, a couple of their glows, and what they're looking on moving forward to in the future of this school year to really look at are those special populations and looking at the building level trends for different grade levels and special populations, and how are the interventions working in a very discrete manner for those students. Are they increasing the attendance rates for those students? NFA Maine, when we went to NFA Maine, they shared with us one of the pieces that they do with their students who have high attendance absences was that they actually meet one-on-one with the students, and they have intervention circles with the students. They talk to them about why they're not attending, what would make them feel better to come to school, how can they help them, what supports do they need. As we know, they're a little bit more vocal about what their needs are, so they were able to take some of those items under their wings and actually implement them to support those students in increasing their attendance. The other thing that they did that they're going to be rolling out shortly is that they are using their visual arts classes at NFA Maine to develop a flyer that's going to make community connections. They're going to deliver some of those flyers to different community areas. One of the examples they provided was at grocery stores to put these flyers in grocery bags. When people come and they buy their groceries, they can get a little information about how important attendance is. What is the data behind it? Why is it important? Why is it important to be in school daily? In Vales Gate, they had a wonderful tiered attendance intervention plan that discreetly described the roles of each member of their staff and faculty in the building and how that impacts the child and that attendance. As we know, as children get older, from kindergarten, pre-K, all the way up through high school, we know that the first piece for students to stay in school and to come to school daily is that human interaction, that positive relationship with at least one other person in their lives. And that's what Vales Gate was talking about when they talked about their tiered attendance plan. They sat there and they said, this person has this role to address this group of students. One of the interesting grows for them, it wasn't necessarily a subpopulation that they wanted to target this year. It was a grade level or two. Their kindergarten and first grades, they recognize that the first step to building those positive habits happen at the kindergarten and first grade level, instilling them at the younger age. So how can we improve on our welcoming and affirming environment to continue on from kindergarten all the way through the 5th grade to improve their chronic absenteeism?
So what are their next steps in our district focus? And I know that Dr. Coit kind of reviewed a lot of the building level intervention plans for them to really reflect and revise those building and intervention plans. We started that process of them really looking, how can we use our prior year's data and really prepare our building and our teachers and our school community on attendance. We really want to focus on the data analysis and process. What reports you're looking at, what reports on the data dashboard, how are you interpreting that with your teachers, and how are you discussing it in PLCs. So we started to have this discussion, and I think for many of the buildings it was very eye-opening in what they're looking at and why they're looking at it. As you guys even heard tonight, we have to review our homeless student information and supports. Our homeless population for chronic absenteeism was the highest, and we know that with housing insufficiency and homelessness, what the district found in going through and speaking with a lot of buildings, we have two different types of homeless families. We have a homeless family that is doubled up, where they're staying with a relative or a friend, and we have another type of homeless family that is sheltered. Both sets of situations lead to chronic absenteeism, some based on transportation, and the other about being comfortable to obtain the supports. So we have to work with our community partnerships and our homeless liaison to make sure that families are aware of what services we can bring, and then try to look at our transportation and how we can try to facilitate those services. The one thing that's very difficult about McKinney-Vento transportation, if the shelter is in Middletown or Fishkill, we have to figure out how to transport students from those locations. That process can take a week or two, and that's what we're really struggling with. We have a large transportation matrix, and really trying to figure out and think outside of the box. So part of our work, Dr. Coit and myself will be working with our McKinney-Vento and transportation to see if anything can be done, how can we look at this problem differently. We also have to strengthen community partnerships. The PPS director, Mr. Jernigan, has already started holding our interagency collaboration meetings. And what are the county support? Newburgh is a big, small part of Orange County, and some of the resources within Orange County lay outside of the reach of our families. And how can we make sure that services are here for our students and our families that we're seeing in need? A part of that is immunizations. This was one thing, especially on the elementary level, that the buildings identified that our families are struggling with. And if a student is not immunized, I'm going to get it. If they're not, that leads to exclusion, which can lead to chronic absenteeism. Because as we remember, chronic absenteeism is not excused or unexcused, it's just absent. So if you are excluded from school because you do not have an immunization, then how are we making sure that our families have a clinic? So we are working with the health service and the FACE department, Sharon Patalos and a couple other agencies that we don't know yet, to see if there are ways that we can hold clinics for our families at the beginning and the middle of September so we do not have students excluded from school. The other thing, the last thing that we're really looking for, because we do have it within our strategic plan to have 95% staff and student attendance, is to look at how we're looking at our dashboards. Is the information for principals to build interventions readily available? There are a couple of things that this has opened our eyes to as a data department that we have to switch, and we're going to be working on redesigning some of our student our staff dashboards surrounding attendance. So that concludes our presentation. Is there any questions? Are we on track?
Mr. Lamar, Mr. Howard.
Yeah, first I was just curious, you were just mentioning an absence is an absence regardless of whether it's excused, unexcused, or whatever. Is there a tracking of what the absences are due to, whether it be illness, family emergency, or just unexcused?
Yes. So that's the certification part of our attendance process. So our attendance clerks, we do have a reason for each attendance. If we are not given a reason by a parent, it's an unexcused absence. That's also required if a student brings in a sick note or a doctor note. All of those are coded within our student information system.
Is that tracked? Like, is that accumulated? Can we at some point get that data?
In terms of what? What
the primary cause of these absences is? Are they illnesses? Are they, that's my question.
So I definitely can give you accounting. It's something that we do report. What we find in trying to increase the communication and the engagement with our families is to make sure they're giving us a reason. Sometimes students are absent and we don't have a reason, and that's where the personnel department comes in. They try to figure out, get information from parents, but I could definitely provide that to you.
I'd also like to add that sometimes some of our families leave for extended periods of time, just a cultural experience, so that would also add to why some of the absences are greater in some situations.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I applaud you for this report, but I'm somewhat disturbed because it's somewhat confusing, and I'll tell you why. So normally when you see 90s, 91, 87, 89, those are normally good numbers. Somebody's passing the test, 87, it looks good. But chronic absenteeism is 10%. So anything below a 90 or a 90 and below is chronic absenteeism. Okay, so that being said, some of the realities, Mr. Lamar just asked a great question, and I work with a lot of kids in the community. I work with a lot of families. My wife works with some of the kids through the Youth Advocate Program, and we have conversations about some of the things. We need to get to a realistic view of what's really going on. I mean, I'm going to say sickness is probably not the reason why kids aren't coming to school, homeless kids. It's bigger things. There's more things going on. And my concern is what are we doing as a district to get those wraparound services? I mean, these kids are, if you see the conditions and see what some of these children go through on a daily basis, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, coming to school is not at the top of their list. It's eating, it's clothing, it's sleeping in one hotel with 6 kids and a parent. Our kids, some of these kids are going through hell. And I understand, those are questions that we need to address, but how do we do it? How do we do it if we don't have the wraparound services, if we don't understand what the real issues are? Yes, we're saying they're homeless. Yes, we're saying that they're in transition. But the reality is some of these kids are living in hell. And my thing is, it's a problem. We got to get the kids to school, but real talk, there's things on their priority list that's higher than school. I know it sounds crazy, but there's things that are bigger, more important to these kids. Like you got to see some of the conditions some of these families live in, and I don't know what the answer is.
I don't think that it's an easy answer. It's our community. And the poverty in our district is at all boundaries of this district. Okay, so it's not just one area. We're impoverished throughout. So I think that the expanded work that the district has focused on with family and community engagement, really trying to make sure that parents understand what resources and programs are available to them. It's also having programs where we are starting in certain areas, and I know that Dr. Freeman Mack can speak more to this regarding food insufficiency. It's also collaborating with the Armory and other community-based organizations to get the words out, because we are an institution and families don't always feel safe. Saying that you are homeless when you're doubled up with a family member is not comfortable to some people. It really isn't. And what happens is our transportation is based on their legal address. So it's making them feel like there's someone, whether it's a parent liaison or a coordinator, to give that information so that we can support them without shame. So it's not an easy answer. And if we're not in the field connecting with community and county resources, that work doesn't happen. And I think that is really a large part of why there has been an expansion of the family and community engagement and parent liaison. So there are people that can speak to someone in the community about what we can offer, and to also notice if there's an issue, to be their spokesperson with getting an address change, to making sure that there's a bus stop, to going into those concerns. I think our PPS department does also try to do that, but also allowing our leaders that information and knowledge.
If I can. One of the things I think is very important, and we need to understand as a district, because I didn't realize it till earlier this evening when we went back to executive session and Dr. Farrell said something to me that really shocked me, and it makes so much sense. But the dignity and pride of some of these kids, we need to be more cognitive of finding out what's really going on with some of these kids. And she was telling me that one of the things they do, that the kids that live in these shelters and stuff, they're supposed to be the first kids picked up so that other kids don't see that. And the dignity and pride is so huge and so important. I guess my next question, we're coming up on the budget season in the district. Has there been any conversation about increasing the FACE team, increasing the amount of people that we have that are actively engaged, that are actively in the community, that are actively out there for these scholars? Because it's a large portion of what we deal with in this community, and we need boots on the ground. So I hope that's going to be part of our budget conversation coming up. We need to increase that department. I think personally, I could be wrong, but I just say more feet on the ground, more boots on the ground. I think we can, attack this issue a little better. We can't do it with a skeleton force. It can't happen. It won't work.
Ms. Boulay.
Thank you for compiling the information, and thank you for presenting it the way that you did tonight. I have a few questions and a few comments. The first thing that I noticed was you have the teachers listed here and the typists and all of that. I was confused as to why that was there, because contractually, teachers and CSEA workers have a certain amount of days that they are allotted to take. And there's another layer that's even in there. Before they even reach that level, they hit a threshold where they have to submit a paper that says that they went to the doctor. So in my mind, if a teacher, CSE worker is out, it's because they are sick. So if what we're looking at is to improve that attendance for the teachers, I'm not sure why that would be here, because I wouldn't want them in the school if they were sick, and I wouldn't want them to not, take what is there. So I just wasn't sure why they were there.
This part is their clear communication in the attendance process. So just to clarify that bullet point,
okay.
Is there clear communication within the process? So an expectation for a teacher would be, I take attendance the first 10 minutes of class or the first 15 minutes of every class. For secondary and elementary, there's an expectation. Or there's an expectation if I don't see a student in my class, what is that I am supposed to be doing? For a typist, it's how I'm certifying attendance. So this has to do in regards to student the process of the student attendance within the structure of the school
I
building.
misunderstood.
It's okay. No,
I thought you were tagging their attendance.
we do have goals around staff attendance as well, but we do know that that's a consideration.
Okay.
We understand that people get sick. We know that.
The next thing, when you just think of, because you have daily average attendance, which is calculated totally differently than chronic absenteeism, and I know the state tags the chronic absenteeism, so I'm going to speak about that. That's where I'm coming from. So, of course, some of the kids who are chronically absent are sick. So then my natural logical question is, we're still doing everything that we can do to ensure that the schools are safe, right? Ventilation systems, all of that. Do we still have hand sanitizer? Are we still disinfecting the classrooms, especially with RSV and the 2 types of flu and the COVID that are here present? I don't expect an answer. I'm just saying, I'm assuming that we are looking at all the influencers that influence attendance. The next thing, I was confused about, when you look at the recommendations by building, right? It doesn't look like we have a uniform district plan. You have some schools that are targeting average daily attendance. You've got others who say they're targeting only chronic absenteeism. It looks like there's holes, right? Like Swiss cheese, that we don't have a uniform district-wide policy for that. And then if we go to the next and to the next column that's there, the next steps are things like decrease absenteeism 3 to 5%. Well, how are you going to do that? Like, there's no action steps for that, and there's even one school that's only targeting one ethnic group. There's another school who believes that if they have a night for L's, that would solve. I just, the uniformity of it is, what am I missing?
And I know that the Swiss cheese, and I'm glad you used that analogy. Every building had a different thing within their data to work on, right? So if I came up with a uniform plan for them to decrease their chronic absenteeism, a building like South only has 13%. Could it be lower? Definitely could be lower. The approach that we took is that we looked at their building plan. We looked at their in-building procedures to bring that uniformity across the district. So the first step that we're looking at is the building intervention plans. We had some building intervention plans where it was very clearly stated about what each member within their school building had to do. Whereas I went to the next building, and that was not the case. So a part of our strategy this year in terms of looking at chronic absenteeism is to really spend time with the building level leaders to look at the basis or the foundation to address chronic absenteeism. So they are a little bit different. Their data is a little bit different. I can go to one building, and their ELS can be the highest population. I had another building where their Asian population was the highest chronic absenteeism. So what I was doing with them and in our work and in our quarterly meetings is to have them look at their data and to react to their data and build interventions to their data. We are huge different, with all different varying types of situations that occur. We had one building where there was a concern because students were leaving early. They were leaving, so we took the approach is we're going to look at your building plan, we're going to look at your chronic absentee rates, we're going to help you set up goals, we're going to address individual issues, under the premise that next year when we go in, you're going to have a more solid building intervention plan that's clearly communicated to your school community that is in alignment with every other building in this district. We're going to hope to see that increase in daily attendance rate. Your certification attendance is going to be solid, and your enrollment and disenrollment is going to be solid as well. The enrollment of a student and the disenrollment are kind of bookends to how we look at data and how the state calculates averages. We had, especially at the secondary, what they saw is that they had a tardiness issue. All of these little things lead into what creates a chronic absenteeism program. So I have to strengthen the building's foundation to move forward to try to decrease that overall rate and increase the daily attendance rate.
So if I could just clarify, so I know in some buildings, the ones that I worked in, right, especially when COVID hit, it was you've got to find the time, and if a kid is absent 3 days in a row, you're going to call home. Even if you do it on your time, you're calling home, then you're going into PLP where it's logged, right? And that's what you're going to do. Now, you either didn't get the parent because the phones don't work, right? And I know we all understand how that's almost impossible to do, but you spent the time doing that. So then you might be up to day 10, the kid is absent. Some schools have attendance officers. So you may fill out a form and you say, here, attendance officer, here you go. It's now been 10 days. Can you track this kid? And then they try it 5 times, and then they don't. So over the time it takes from the absence to the time that child could be in huge distress is a wide window. So when I was talking about like uniformity, if we had some kind of a policy that would say, look, this kid is absent 2 days, here's what you're going to do, and then give the teachers the time to do that. I want them, to think that I'm just saying they have the time to do it. But even more importantly, the CPS aspect, the educational neglect aspect, in 17 and a half years, every time, because we're mandated, we don't judge the reason. It's just if you suspect, you must report. So if a kid is absent for a certain amount of days, and I can't get that parent, and nobody else can get that parent, then every time I filed that report, it's either unfounded, like we don't have enough evidence, or it's founded. Every time it was founded.
Right.
But we don't say
that's the building intervention plan. And I think that what we found in certain, that kind of breakdown that you're speaking to, that is a part of the building intervention plan. We found some buildings is very clear, like what you're saying, 2 days, 3 days, there's a timeline, there's a this and a that. I have I have some buildings where that plan is not as solid.
Right.
So those intervention plans, that's going to be the work of Dr. Coit this year, to work with building level leaders to have them come into compliance. There's some buildings, their building intervention plan is solid. Those calls are being made. If a student has not showed up in 7 days, Dr. Coit has a call, the attendance teachers. So in some buildings, it's going. It is exactly what you're saying. In other buildings, I have to shore up their foundation. I have, we have new leaders, there's transition, clerical lead, we have to shore up that foundation. So that's part of the focus. And when we looked at intervention plans and that research over the summer, that's what it said. You have to have a clearly articulated plan, and that's also where FACE comes in. FACE comes in because then we can communicate with parents regarding change of information and address. And Dr. Coit can also work with buildings and how to get that done smoother.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lamar?
Directly off of that, so right now there is no uniform process for how the reporting of absenteeism with a child gets escalated? Is that what you're saying?
No. I didn't say that. There is a process. Each building does have a process.
A uniform. There is no uniform process.
There is no uniform process in such as that everybody after 3 days is following. However, there are mandated things within law. If we do not see anything, I know that. And within the attendance guide, there is also a process that if a student is not seen, then there should be an escalation.
So just a pause for 1 second. There is a uniform process for the data reporting, the data collection, the data input. It is followed by the regulations set by the Regional Information Center and the State Education Department.
Yes.
So the way we record our data is absolutely uniform, correct, Ms. Peterson? Where there is some differences in the work that's being done, I heard Dr. Coit and Ms. Peterson basically say they're working with each individual school to conduct a needs analysis to determine what's preventing those students from attending, and then guiding them to create a building intervention plan based on the capacity of the adults in that building to support those kids to turn that around, as well as the parents. So is there a uniform process across the district? Absolutely. We have a system where we have a team of individuals going into every building, sitting down, teaching them how to analyze the data to try to figure out the root causes in that particular building and design interventions. So do we have one strategy that we implement across the district? No. Do we have a process to be respectful of the building to identify what those needs are? Absolutely.
So in every building, there is some mark at which, some number of absences at which they have been directed that they should reach out to their administrator.
Yes.
And then at what point do the administrators go, if the administrators or the secretaries, whoever's making the phone calls from the office, if it's out of the hands of the teachers, at what point does that go beyond? Does it come up here, or does it?
To be clear, each building has a building intervention plan. Each building has an attendance team where they review attendance data weekly. I want to be very clear about that. What I'm working with them is how they build interventions and how they look at their data. So each building already has those practices. Our attendance guides lays out the expectation for teachers, clerks, and administrators around students that are non-attendance. I want to make that very clear.
Ms. Peterson, could you also address Infinite Campus and the robocalls and the work that we're doing with that?
So Infinite Campus has, I know that many people have, like, why am I getting so many calls or this calls? I know certain buildings have started more of a robocall for students that have been tardy or they're not here today in an effort to try to ramp up parents' awareness that we are missing them. We notice that they're not in attendance and trying to get students to come in.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I understand we're doing a lot. We are doing a lot. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And I would like, at some point in time, if the board can get a report, either in a weekly, to walk us through that process. Because where I'm coming up short, where I'm getting confused is, like, the question came from a few board members, the uniformity. Like, there needs to be uniformity. I mean, I can understand, I understand people doing little things a little differently, but we don't have the luxury of missing out on a child or not knowing something that's going on. If we have an overview of A, B, C, D, all that needs to be done. If a child is not in school for 3 days, then this is done. If we're not unable to make because I'm going to tell you, yeah, we get a lot of robocalls. I get robocalls. I only have a kid in my house. But listen. Some people don't even listen to those robocalls. A lot of these homes don't have adults to listen to those calls. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I get those robocalls sometimes I don't even answer because I was like, I don't have any kids. Or I'm just not going to answer. So I would love to know, how are we determining if parents are getting those robocalls?
So, to be clear, there is a set expectation within our general attendance process around students that are not in attendance. We have general guidelines. Our work is really more about decreasing overall rates, which is really about interventions. So each building is mandated to follow the attendance guide, which has practices on certification, has practices on how to address chronic absenteeism. What I need the buildings to do is, you could do all of those general practices and you could still have an issue. I need you to open your eyes to what that issue is, whether it's a special population, a certain group of students, to build interventions that are custom for whatever is appearing within your school environment. So I just want to be very clear on that. We do have building intervention plans. Leaders do have expectations of teachers regarding what happens with a student. I would like to see interventions based on what we're seeing in the data, not a general. You need to be a little bit more specific based on the data that you have coming out of your building.
Very simple follow-up question. Do we have the manpower to do all this work in each building? I think
that intervention work is intervention work. Could there always be more sets of hands? Definitely. There definitely could be more sets of hands to do the work.
Okay.
There could be more sets of hands knocking on doors to see where students are. I'm not going to ever say that we don't need those people. We do. We do.
Thank you.
Mr. Levenstein, then Ms. Boulay.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. President. So, firstly, I heard some valid points from Dr. Cloyd and Ms. Peterson, and Ms. Boulay and Mr. Howard and Mr. Lamar and Mr. Forget. But I would like to just go back a little bit and to understand. Now, so just one comment is we can't have a uniform plan and the same for high schoolers and elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have that. But I want to understand average daily attendance.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand chronic absenteeism is 10%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means, in theory, if a student misses one full day every 2 weeks, they're a chronic absentee student.
Correct.
Okay? All right, so now, what
in
if...
grades 1 through 12.
In grades 1 through 12. Okay, so now, let's just say in high school, someone doesn't show up for period 1 for 2 weeks. How does that affect their average daily attendance? What category are they in? And are they chronically absent too?
So secondary attendance, and that's why the state, in my data, you saw this, that the state disaggregated grades 1 through 8 and 9 through 12, okay? Because on the secondary level, it's minutes, right? So if I sit in one class, it's 44 minutes, and it's a half-day, whole-day attendance calculation. So I don't like to say that because every period, that first period class is just as important to get to the 5th period and the 8th period class, but if there's a
I just
trend,
use that as an example,
right.
so...
If there's a trend, it doesn't count for their overall chronic absenteeism, but it does account for their rate, it accounts for their eligibility, it counts for their academic performance. So I like to generally say every period, every day, on time and prepared to learn. That's something that is important for everyone to know.
I get that, and that's what we want. But I'm trying to understand the data of average daily attendance. Do they have to miss 2 periods and then they're absent for the day? Do they have to miss 3 periods? What is the criteria to create a zero or absent for that day?
So when I calculate average daily attendance, I'm looking at our students from pre-K to 12. So I'm looking at the students that are in our pre-K program, our first and a second grade, because those first 3 grade levels, the pre-K and the kindergarten grade level is going to inform my chronic absenteeism level. So I'm looking at the average percentage of all students that are in my school. So if I have 600 students, out of those 600 students, how many students are present in that seat that day?
So average daily attendance is not by student, it's by building or grade?
This average that I'm showing you is the overall district, so I'm taking all the students that are in my district.
Is there by student? Is there an attendance?
Yes. Students, okay, so I have my individual daily rate as a student, I have my individual daily average attendance rate as a school building, and then I have an average daily attendance as a district. All numbers are important to look at.
I get it. So then the answer to my question, though, if you miss first period for 10 days, are you a chronically absent student according to that?
No.
It's a great question.
You're
I
not,
would love to hear the
but
answer.
for a student in the high school, if you are absent, there's other things that you can be impacted. Your eligibility is going to be impacted.
I understand that. You can't go to the prom. I do understand that, but that's not what my question is.
No, because it's a half-day, whole-day calculation.
Okay, so that's really what the answer is. It's if you're there for 4 periods or more, you're there that day. Is that what you're saying?
It depends. If you're a secondary student, and it depends on the amount of classes that you are enrolled. It's a deeper calculation. How many classes you're enrolled in. There's a half-day, whole-day calculation amount that we have to report to the state. These calculations are based on what students are enrolled in. It's not just for the secondary level, and that is why the state separates them out. I have to report to the state as the data officer what students are enrolled, what courses on the secondary they're enrolled in, and then I have to report the attendance in that course. So it's a deeper calculation.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question that's related to Mr. Levinstein's question. You have a high school student enrolled in 9 classes. They never show up for periods 1, 2, and 3. At the end of the year, they're going to get a certification saying perfect attendance. Is that possible?
No, the reason why I'm saying this is there's 2 different calculations. There's a half-day, whole-day attendance calculation for chronic absenteeism, and then there's a daily average attendance. For perfect attendance, we use daily average attendance, and that student would not be perfect attendance. But in terms of the federal calculation surrounding chronic absenteeism, they look at a different measure.
If they were missed every single first period class, they would still get the perfect attendance because they were there more than half of the first. And
no, perfect attendance is that you're in the seat every day for it's a daily average attendance calculation, which is different than chronic absenteeism. And I've tried to differentiate.
It's very confusing, but
it is.
The point is there's too many calculations here. We just got to get kids in the schools.
I'm just happy I can answer all the questions as to what each one of them is.
We just got to get kids in the schools.
Yes.
Now, we had 2 brave homeless parents come tonight. The fact that they came here tonight after months of trying to get their situation resolved, that says there's a problem because they had to leave their kids to come here to say, hey, I've tried everything. Now I have to come here. Why does it take that to get their situation solved? It should be first call to the bus company, hey, I'm homeless. The bus isn't coming. It should be the bus company working with us to say, hey, there's a problem. So let's fix this.
No, we don't disagree. That was brave, but we can't make the assumption that we have all the facts and information. I agree that this is a much lengthier conversation, and perhaps, we talk about this a lot. Dr. Sklar's, perhaps, one of the things that we talked about is putting some information on the website. Perhaps we have a section on the website where we can embed some questions from members of the community, and then we have some responses to have a more clear response, because I do believe that it takes a little bit more than, all the calculations that we're talking about. At the end of the day, we need to get students in seats. And so I want to go back a little bit and bring it back to a student focus. Mr. Howard, we learned the other day, we do have students in our district who they exemplify really high attendance. That does not necessarily tell us the entire picture. And so it sometimes isn't necessarily about absenteeism or chronic absenteeism. Yes, that is a trigger. But what we should look at, we need to make sure that we have folks in our buildings who have established relationships with children. Because if we did not have an established relationship with that child who has a really high, 90-plus average and does not miss school, we would not know the types of things that were happening in a household, because that child does not present that there's an issue in the household. So they come to school, much to Mr. Stridiron's statement, which is, very true. But what we need to do is have more of a student-centered focus and making sure that we have established relationships with children and really teaching to the whole child. So that is agreed upon concept, and we need to find a way to make sure that students enter, they feel safe. Our families who feel that they are not connected are connected, so they do not have to come to a podium to speak, and we make sure that we're providing them with the resources and the opportunities that they need. So thank you.
Ms. Boulay and Mr. Howard.
Just a couple other things to throw in. The population, in my experience over 17 years, that are chronically absent I've not seen the homeless kids because and I had taught many homeless kids because they come because they want to eat. They come because they want to be warm, and they come so that they can be part of a group. So I personally have not seen that, but I totally believe that, yes, that is true, that they don't. But there is many middle-class students who are chronically absent. I don't want us to forget about them, okay, who, when I would call, home, it's like, I won't even say some of the things that I heard from parents, but they should have been in school and were not. And the concern that I have, I'm diligent about this number, is because, teachers, they follow maps and they have to teach each thing each day, right? So if a kid is absent twice a week in a Regents class, and they do that twice a week the first 2 months, you can almost predict they're not going to pass that class because they can't make up the learning that they lost because the teacher doesn't have the time to do that. And we don't really have the ability to do what? You'd pull them out of another class to learn with it, but then they miss that class. So this is a very complex problem with ramifications that go far and wide. So I just want to say a thank you for this, and I'm glad we're speaking about it. And publicly, I have to say, on a much lighter note, Mr. Howard and I believe, agreed.
I hear angels. Mr. Forge.
I just wanted to take a stab at addressing a request for a definition, Mr. Howard. Sorry. So if you think of the two calculations, if you think of average daily attendance as the attendance on that day, right? Average daily attendance is the number of students that attended school divided by the number of students that were supposed to go to school. That gives you your average daily attendance. The calculation for each student is different based upon the level that the student is enrolled in. That's average daily attendance. It's one moment in time on this particular day. Chronic absenteeism tracks the attendance of the student throughout their duration in the school year. So it shifts and it changes. And it's really critical that we take a look at that throughout the year, but we also have to look at what happened on this day and what happened in the community on this day that might have impacted our attendance rate versus throughout the year, what were the patterns and trends. It's just different ways of looking at data that's defined very differently.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, no, I was just going to say, do you think it would be a good idea if the superintendent in the central office, if you can put together a presentation in regards to attendance, absenteeism, and present it to the board and maybe a workshop, because there's a lot of things that we don't know, or we're misunderstanding, or we just don't get. And attendance is one of the most important components of education. And if we could possibly do a needs analysis and bring something to the board prior to budget season so that we can address those needs, because this is a very important area. And I'm going to say before I get off the microphone, the heavy lift is early. Because once you establish that early, kids do what they know. So let's think about that. If that's possible, we can have that presentation.
You're asking the superintendent to compile a report, so it would be good to get a consensus of the board to authorize that.
I thought it was a presentation.
I think he asked for a report.
No, I said presentation.
Okay.
Presentation, and perhaps we can do it in a workshop form, David? Something like that? Because obviously, based on the questions, there's a lot we don't know, or a lot of misunderstanding of certain things and assumptions, and it's not good, and attendance is so important.
Just one last thing. First of all, thank you for putting this together and for standing up there and taking all this. No, but in the presentation, there was the referencing all of the things that each individual school is going to try and do, and that's great, because obviously a certain percentage of all the absenteeism is going to be building specific, and they need to do that. But to me, that's a fine-tune kind of thing, and I think we need to really find the bigger problem, and then the fine-tuning can go along with that. rather than looking at all the things that they think they're going to need to do in their individual buildings, it's like a best practices kind of thing. We should look and see who's having success and see if we can implement that in all the buildings, or perhaps, I know you said New York State doesn't publish, but is there a way, I don't know if superintendents talk to one another, is there a way to find out what districts are having success with this, and we can reach out and find out what they're doing that we could implement here?
So that's a part of what the actual plan is to make sure. But what I'm hearing from the board is that you kind of want to have an understanding of what I place in the attendance guide. What are the common expectations for buildings? I gave you the fine-tune, the nitty-gritty of, okay, you're doing everything that I place in my guide, and this is your data. Now let's respond to your data. So I think that presentation in terms of what's in the attendance guide, what's the expectation, I think that we can look throughout the region. Chronic absenteeism is pretty much the same. Even New York City right now, because their data is out, they're about at 30%. So this is what we're seeing, that's a little bit higher, 2%. They're 2 percentage points lower than us. But a lot of practices within Attendance Works and nationally to address that is what Mr. Howard said: family and community engagement and relationships in a welcoming and affirming environment.
Mr. Forget.
Last comment. In pre-COVID, when they first came out with the calculation for chronic absenteeism, pre-COVID, we have 2 schools that were really hitting the mark and reducing that. It was Gidney Avenue and it was Vales Gate. Correct, Mrs. Moriarty? Thank you.
Mr. President, could you ask Mr. Peterson to repeat that every day, every period, every day? I like that. Say that again, please.
Questions ago, Mr. Howard.
But I wrote it down and I wasn't able
every day, on time, every class. That's what I used to tell my students.
Thank you.
Every student, every day, on time, prepared to learn.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Have a seat.
Yeah.
Thank you. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Manning. Move to item 8, Clerk of the Board.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the approval of the minutes from December 12th, 2023.
Can I have a motion and a second? Second. Questions on this item? Roll call.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein? Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Abstain.
Ms. Boulay?
Abstain because I was absent.
That concludes my items, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Move to item number 9, Board President. We have a discussion item for implementation of iReady testing for grades 9 through 12. This came up about a month ago when we were requesting to have the iReady results, which will be at the next board meeting for grades 3 through 8, I believe. So, Ms. Boulay, I believe you had requested this originally.
Would you like me to talk about this?
Just briefly, just what you're envisioning the need for this is.
All right, so we have various testing instruments that we use in this district that test various parts of literacy, and those exist in the K through 8 level. iReady is a tool that's used those results will be discussed at a different meeting, but that's a snapshot, instantaneous accounting of where the student is on different parts of literacy. It's self-directed, it's computerized, and so for 9 through 12, now I taught English in high school, the last reading level that I would ever see of a kid would have been from many years prior. But yet, like on the Regents exam for grade 11, that English exam, that reading level is really at a first or second year college level. And I had kids that I was teaching that were at a second grade reading level. So we don't have a clear picture of the reading level of kids in high school, except if you took the 8th grade result and attached it to a 9th grader. So the question that I had was for grades 10, 11, and 12, if we could identify those kids that are reading at least like 3-4 levels below reading level, we could create, hopefully, some kind of intervention, maybe, I don't know what it would be, not up to me, but maybe an idea, take them off the curriculum map. Maybe they don't read Romeo and Juliet, instead they learn how to read at a grade level kind of thing. Like we could get creative, think outside the box, but right now we don't know what the real deal is. So that was the discussion of, could we use iReady to try to identify that? And then we could, and it's quick, it's done 3 times a year for K through 8, we could track the progress.
Dr. Freeman-Mac?
So, Ms. Boulay, what aspect of iReady, as it relates to the diagnostic for 9 through 12, or even the Big 6 when we think of that, what aspect of it are you hoping to assess within students in grades 9 through 12?
Hope to be able to see what the grade level is, and if it's in comprehension, whatever area is the weakest, that maybe we could, improve that. It's really hard when you're teaching it, right? If you have to read to the child the material because they can't read it or they can't write, and they're going to be taking a 3-hour test and reading how many, essays, and there has to be something I would hope that we could come up with as a plan to help those students so that when they exit Academy Field, that they can, do a job application, be productive citizens, rather than leave with like a 3rd grade reading level.
So iReady does not test writing in any way, shape, or form. So iReady, not many high schools have used it as a diagnostic tool. They have used it for students with disabilities to support them, to examine where they're at, to support them in 9th and 10th grade. iReady is interesting because it does use the next gen standards. It is aligned to the standards, but in some aspects of it, it doesn't have the rigor that we would need to see for high school. So if we were going to implement it in high school, I think it's something that would definitely show our areas of support that are needed for students, but the students, for lack of a better way to say it, may not choose to want to be involved in it. When we've used iReady in the high school setting and other situations, at that point in their cognitive level and at their age, they're like, I'm not doing this. So we can look at some other diagnostic tools that may support them, but iReady has a system within it where when a student sits to take it, if they get a question wrong, it goes down a question. If they get a question correct, it goes up. But if a student isn't taking it with fidelity, and that's what may happen in a high school setting, then the tool is not going to be effective.
And I
think
appreciate
it's something that we can look into, and we can see, well, what's the best tool for our students? There are aspects within iReady where we can focus on the mastery and those lessons, because I think that's imperative. But iReady may not be the best diagnostic tool if we're going to relate it to a Regents exam or instruction. And I just want to say, if a child wants to read Romeo and Juliet, then we make it accessible to them. If they are having issues with reading, because we do 2 things with reading. We read, we learn to read, and then we read to learn. So if our students are having difficulty reading, we're going to keep teaching them how to, and so that they will learn how to read. But we're not going to stop them for having access to Romeo and Juliet.
No, and I don't want you to think that that's what I meant. I've taught many years. It's very difficult to see, especially young males, right, in particular, 16 years old, 17 years old, who only read at a 2nd grade level, who only really know that they don't fit. They know that they don't know, and they want to know, right? They do. They definitely do. And some of them disrupt so that they're not targeted right? And then you have a whole set of other problems, and then you have suspensions. My only goal is to have us improve their quality of life. And I understand that you may think that they may not want to do it, whatever. And I'm going to say, I think if we did it in a way in which it was confidential, I used to put tape over my door, so no, you know what I'm saying? Kids don't want to be different. They want to know. I don't know how you do that. All I'm saying is, I'm just giving you my opinion. That's why I said, if we could test
it's
them.
not necessarily that. And even like there's a value in a read aloud in a high school classroom. There's a value in modeling for that student what those words sound like and how to read. There's a value in that. Like we have to look at all of those instructional tools and again look at where that child is at and what's best for them. But students, you know, with iReady, we need to examine it and really see it at the high school level. When I did a poll, you know, of high schools across the state of New York, there's maybe 6 of them that are using it in a special ed setting in an 812 or a 12, you know, to support those students. And that's just with 9th grade. And there's some other components that can come with it. I don't want to say it's something that's not useful because it absolutely would be, and we'll do whatever we need to do for our students. But I think it's something that we should continue to look at and not just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, and I would love that. I would just love it, and it might even help the absenteeism rate because that's what I've heard repeatedly. I don't come to school because I can't read. I'm not going to go in that classroom because I'm not going to let anybody know that I can't do that. I don't want anybody to know I can't write the sentence, the dog went down the street. And teachers, you know, some teachers do have the rapport with their kids that that's the feedback that they get, and I know that we could do better. And I know we all want to.
Mr. Howard, then Mr. Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, second time for the night, I think we're agreeing on something, me and Ms. Boulay. So, but I firmly believe, I understand her request, and I understand your reason why you say it's not a fit. But can we come up with alternatives? Because I've always been a firm believer in saying that when kids learn to read, they read to learn. And something that Ms. Boulay said is something that I've always said. I say it at the Armory. I say it when I'm in the community. If kids don't know how to read by grade 3, that's where the behavior issues set out. Because I'm going to tell you, as a young black boy, when I was in elementary school, and I used to have friends of mine, one of their biggest fears was being called on to read, and they knew they couldn't read. So they acted out. So they would get kicked out of class, so that they can be the tough guy, so that they can say, I'm cool, because they weren't exposed for not being able to read. But my bigger question is this, and I've asked this question since I've been on this board. Do we socially promote? And the answer to that question is no. So if we don't socially promote, how do we end up with middle school and high school kids who can't read? How do they pass from grade to grade and they can't read? I mean, I don't get it. Save for a learning disability or something like that, children should be able to read. And I got to be perfectly honest with you. I do a lot of mentoring with some of the high school and middle school kids. And when I get them to write things down, I read it sometimes. This can't be this is not high school. This is not middle school. So how do we help those scholars? Not expose them, not embarrass them, but how do we get them to where they need to be? How do we do that, Doc?
Yes.
So, Onyx's presentation talked about attendance. I tried to tie it into family, community engagement, having relationships with students. Some of the work that the FACE team has begun to accomplish and to have for our families, we have monthly workshops-ish to help our families with different aspects of curriculum and instruction. So again, we have to make sure that we have credible messengers. What we did thus far, we increased our family community engagement team this year with last year's budget, 3 additional people. So we have to do a better job in terms of establishing a relationship with our families because it truly starts at home. And so until we are able to bridge that gap and have a love and level of literacy, P12, P16, and, have our families and members of our community buy in, we are doing it alone, because oftentimes, the time students come to us, it is sometimes too late, right? But we're not going to give up. We're going to continue to look for opportunities that we can, work with our families. It's a heavy lift, but it's not an impossible feat. And so we're going to continue to think of new ways that we can target instruction, meet with families, develop a love of literacy, P12. It cannot only be in the foundational years. I think, it would be great if every teacher considered themselves a teacher of literacy or reading, because through every single content area is an opportunity to teach literacy and numeracy. And so those are the types of things we have to do if we talk about building capacity in terms of professional development.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Lamar.
This is something I probably would have saved for the next presentation next time around with the iReady, but since it got brought up, when we have a student, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when we have a student that's a grade level below, that's a tier 1 intervention begins, right? And if there's 2 or more below, it's a tier 2. There's another level of intervention, right? So and that's based off of the iReady data, correct? So when they get to 9th grade, when they no?
That's just one data point.
Okay. So that would be my question. So when they get to 10th grade, no, 9th grade, all we know iReady related is where they were at the end of 8th grade. How do we know what help they should be getting if we don't know how far behind they are because we're not continuing the testing that it was all based on in the first place?
So I'll say some of what occurs. We do know which level they are based on iReady and other different points with our curriculum resources. So we try to target that instructional approach. We spiral. We go back to, in some instances, some foundational opportunities to reteach some strategies. We have a heavy lift. I don't want to go back to, COVID did X, Y, Z, but I have to speak about it because we're still feeling the impact of some of what happened with COVID, right? And reading and literacy. We were disconnected from students. It was hard for our teachers. It was new for them. They did the best job that they could do, but we know that in addition to, having literacy levels that lag behind, we now have to overcome a pandemic that we were not accustomed to doing. Our teachers worked diligently to learn to teach through a square. Now think about what the affect was on the students as well as teachers who were used to having close contact and intimate contact with students in terms of teaching and learning. So we have some things that we need to work on as a nation, and we're hoping to do that one student at a time. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but we know that we have a huge task in front of us, and so we agree.
Any other comments on this item? All right, great discussion, and it'll be followed up in the next few months. Yes. Thank you. Items 9.2 and 9.3 are consent items. Would anybody like to separate those items? All right. We need a motion and a second for 9.2 and 9.3.
Second.
Any questions on these items? Mr. Levinstein.
So, Mr. Howard, since I didn't see the policy meeting, is it the recommendation of the policy committee to go forward with these two?
Yes, that was the consensus of the policy committee prior to tonight's meeting, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Roll call, please.
Mr. Doré? Yes. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
That concludes my items. We're going to move to item 10, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 10.1 through 10.19 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Ms. Boulay.
I'm sorry. 10.2 and I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about reading. Give me a sec. 10.17 and that's it.
Any other items to be separated? Okay, so we will need a motion and a second from items 10.1 through 10.19 minus 10.2 and 10.17.
Motion. So moved.
Mr. Lamar, do you have a question?
Can we?
Microphone, please, if you have one.
Yeah, can we separate out .19 as well?
So I need to separate 10.19. So we're going to, I need a motion and a second from 10.1 through 10.18 minus 10.2 and 10.17, please. Can I have a motion and a second on those items?
Motion. Oh, sorry.
Motion and a second, okay. Any questions on these items? Roll call, please.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Lamar? Yes. Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli? Yes. Mr. Duray?
Item 10.2, resolution to create temporary assistant principal position. Can I have a motion and a second, please? Questions on this item? Roll call.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
No.
Ms. Boulay?
No.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Item passes.
10.17, resolution to approve Director of Food Services appointment. Can I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Any questions on this item? I have some questions, actually. Oh, do you want to go? Okay. So basically on this item, we have a posting for a school lunch director. And the resolution says Director of Food Services. Is there a difference between the two?
Point of order. There's a typo on the top part. So the be it resolved, that's correct. So there wouldn't be any resolution needed. The position of Director of Food Service, that's correct.
Yes, but the job posting was school lunch director. So whoever applied for this job applied for a school lunch director job. And now the appointment is for Director of Food Services. I just don't know if there is a specific job title of Director of Food Services that's different than school lunch director. Mr. Shaw.
That would be an issue of being a civil service position, that the City Civil Service Commission would have a job title, and this should be consistent with what the city definition is.
So is the school lunch director that was posted the actual civil service designation, or is it Director of Food Services?
I believe this is the Director of Food Service.
So the civil service part definition is, or at least the title is Director of Food Services. So the posting is for something different, even though it says it's contingent on the results of a civil service exam. Is that going to be an issue for this item to move forward? Or, Mr. Shaw, could you give us some clarity on that?
I think you would have the ability to make this appointment consistent with the Civil Service Commission.
Okay. The other question I had regarding this position is, I asked for specific information so I could make a decision on this position related to the experience and the training that's required for the position. And I didn't receive that information. The only information that I have is what's available online for this person that was put up by their employer, their current employer. And that information shows that they do not meet either A, B, or C of the acceptable experience and training. It's actually required by the State Education Department. In 2015, there was a regulation that was...
I'm sorry. I think this is executive session conversation. We had our executive session. You chose, Mr. Stradiron, not to ask any additional questions. It's really inappropriate to discuss personnel on the floor.
Mr. Shaw, can I talk regarding the State Education Department regulations?
At this point, you know, you can vote no to the resolution as presented, right? The administrative body makes a recommendation to a position. You can vote yes or no. You know, to
I'm
come on.
asking Mr. Shaw whether or not I can talk about the state regulation for this position.
To come on the floor to decide that you want to discuss a state regulation, you know, this went through a process, and we're here to make a recommendation. If it's a yes or a no, you had an opportunity to discuss personnel in the back of the room.
And I was denied the information.
The background information on an individual should be a discussion in terms of qualification. It's private information as to them. The regulations of the State Education Department should be informative, but at the end of the day, the qualifications by the Civil Service Department will govern that employment.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. So just going to discuss the actual regulation itself. It was established in 2015 under the Healthy and Hungry Kids, Free Kids Act of 2010, final rule. It sets minimum hiring standards for 3 distinct size categories of schools, depending on the enrollment. And all positions that deal with food service have 3 specific requirements, which are actually in the job posting. So I'm going to be basing my vote on the regulation and the information that's available to me at the time of my vote. Thank you. Ms. Boulay.
You covered it.
Anybody else have any questions on this item? Roll call, please.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn?
No.
Ms. Boulay?
No.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray? Yes. Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Lamar?
No.
That item passes.
Item 10.19, resolution to approve supplemental memorandum of agreement with ENTA. Can I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Any questions on this item? Mr. Lamar.
Yeah, first of all, I completely support this, so nobody needs to worry about that. But I just want to know, the intent of this is to save positions that are at risk moving forward? Are we saving positions by making these changes, or will we? There have been some questions as we approach the budget season about whether there might be positions that have to be eliminated or layoffs or what have you. And does the financial benefit to the district by making this action, is it going to lead to saving any of those positions? Will any of these positions be phased out as these people are being removed?
Mr. Shaw.
It's possible that there will be positions saved. It's possible, depending upon the yield, that there'll be money freed up to hire others. So I think you'll know more about it after you see who has applied, how many positions are affected as you're doing budgeting. It's a couple of weeks premature for that.
Mr. Levinstein.
Mr. President, I just wanted to just make a comment about 10.3, and I know we passed that. If it's not appropriate, I will skip.
Maybe you can follow up at the next meeting when you talk about the minutes?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Any other questions? Roll call.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Dure? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Mr. President, I'd like to request permission to add an item.
What is that item, please?
Be it resolved that employee number 11124 shall be suspended with pay during the pendency of said Section 3028 education law proceedings.
Can I have a motion and a second to add an item?
Second.
Roll call to add?
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Dure? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
The item is added. Can I have a motion? Any discussion on the item? Motion in a second? Okay. Motion in a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on the item? Roll call, please.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Dure? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
That concludes my items, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. Moving to item 11, Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Ms. Roaring.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Roaring has several items for presentation this evening, 11.1 through 11.8.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'm going to separate 11.1 and 11.8. Can I get a motion and a second for 11.2 through 11.7, please?
Motion.
Discussion on these items? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Dure? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Item 11.1, resolution to approve the revision of the budget calendar. Can I have a motion and a second? Discussion on this item? Ms. Boulay.
Just want to, I'm looking at the attachment that went in, so we'll have one less meeting to talk about the budget, correct? So the question is, what if we need more time? We call a special meeting, like how would that work?
I'm sorry, that would be at the discretion of the superintendent and the board president, but we can always add an additional meeting to the calendar if the board chooses to have more discussion and conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I got a question on this calendar. When is the spring break? Is that between the March 19th and the April 2nd meeting?
Yes, it's early.
Last week of March.
Okay, so this calendar does not provide us an opportunity to meet an additional meeting until this third week of April, or second to third week of April. Actually, we have a meeting on a Friday. Yeah, it shortens up by about 11 days.
That's the legal notice. That's not a meeting. That's
Okay.
That's the day it goes in the paper.
So we do have a period of time between April 9th and April, actually the last adoption of the budget to meet, but shortening up by about 11 days or so does make a big difference. So
Well, the board also has the discretionary powers to call for a meeting with the superintendent's consent also at a date other than that would normally be a board meeting.
Oh, yes.
So that gives you some more flexibility, too.
Yeah, there is some time built into this, assuming that we have a normal budget process. We've gone before where we've been meeting some crazy meetings in the budget. So hopefully we'll have a normal budget process and we'll get the budget on time from the state. So fingers crossed. But any other questions or comments on this? Roll call, please.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
No.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Item 11.8, resolution to approve termination of contract with the Palumbo Group. Can I have motion and a second, please? Questions on this item? Roll call, please.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
No.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Farrow. Items 12, Assistant Superintendent, CIO, DPO, Ms. Peterson.
I have items 12.1 through 12.5 tonight on the agenda.
Would any member like to separate these items? Okay, can I have a motion and a second, please?
Second.
Roll call. Or any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard?
Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Item 13, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Secondary, Ms. Moriarty. Oh, no, Dr. Farrow.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have two items this evening, 13.1 and 13.2.
Consent items, would anybody like to separate? Motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Questions? Roll call.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politti? Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. Assistant Superintendent of Exceptional Learners, Mr. Baer.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Exceptional Learner Division has item 14.1 for the board's consideration.
Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Questions on this item? Roll call.
Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
That concludes my items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. Can I have a motion and a second to call this meeting to close?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Ms. Boulay?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Politti?
Yes.
Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.